Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about why you need to stop asking for permission. Okay, this one is a really interesting episode, or a really interesting topic, that I'm very passionate about. Well, I'm very passionate about everything that I talk about here on this podcast, but this specifically because this is something that I have seen throughout all of my years of coaching, but even beyond that, and is something that even I have been a victim of, so to speak, like if I have to be dramatic about it, and really had to and I still do have to catch myself out on it and be like, careful, you're doing that thing again where you're asking permission to be yourself and to live your life. And so this is something that I'm like, okay, if we can all kind of get on board with this and deal with this, then things might be a little bit easier for a lot of us. Okay, so what am I talking about specifically? I'm talking about when we're asking permissions to live our life, and that could be in any kind of which way, like, oh, I really want to move out of the country. I want to live in this other place. This is something that very recently happened in one of the membership groups in the meetings. And there was like one of the women there is dreaming of leaving the country and living somewhere else. And of course, I'm like, a massive traveler myself. Like, go for it, do it. You only live once. If you get to old age and you haven't done it, you might regret it. So just absolutely go for it. And I started noticing a little pattern with what was going on in the meetings, because we had a couple of meetings where this was a conversation. And I noticed that what she was doing was she was asking for permission to live her dream. And so this is what actually sparked the idea of sitting down and making this podcast episode. And that to me was a huge like, oh, okay, I'm glad I just caught that, because I'm not going to advise you anymore on that. You need to start looking inwards and stop asking for permission from everybody but yourself here. Because this is something that I've seen so much. Okay, so obviously the traveling thing and living abroad is a big issue, but it could also be something small. I've seen so many women doing it with something just as simple as buying one of my coaching courses, buying a one-on-one coaching session with me. Even back to when I was a personal trainer, like women would come in for a consultation and then they'd almost have to go home and ask permission, from their families. And when I say families, it could be their husband, it could be, their children, like anything, almost asking for permission of like, is it okay if I put myself first for a minute? Is it okay if I invest in myself right now? So it could be something like that. It could be wanting to buy something that might not be the cheapest, like something for your wardrobe, something for your house. It might not be the cheapest, and you feel like you have to allocate those funds to somebody else in the house or to something else to show that you're responsible or whatever. Meanwhile, that thing would really bring you an immense sense of joy and accomplishment, but it might not, from an outside perspective, look like a logical purchase. So it doesn't have to be something like moving abroad. It could simply be buying a new sofa. It could be quitting the job that makes you miserable. It could be applying for a job that you're like, I'm far too qualified for, but I really want to do this job. It could be moving house. It could be anything. It really could be anything. Starting a degree, or even leaving a degree, starting a new hobby, an evening course, or whatever it might be. So there are so many things that this could be. The traveling thing was just the topic that sort of sparked the idea of sitting down and recording this episode specifically. So I want you to really think broad and wide here, because it can be a number of things, okay? It doesn't have to be something as dramatic as potentially moving abroad and living abroad. But what tends to happen, and what I've noticed, and as I said, I've been here myself, so this is not somebody who hasn't experienced it, is that quite often, I will say for like 98% of the women that I've met in my life, if not more, we want to ask for permission. We want to ask somebody else, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? And when I say it this way, it might sound quite innocent, right? Well, what's wrong with asking for permission, Zara? That's ridiculous. Like now we can't even ask permission or like ask other people their opinions. Absolutely, you can. The problem occurs when you are no longer capable of making the decision on your own without first almost getting an approval from somebody else or permission from somebody else before you can do the thing. That you have found yourself being like, I really want to do this. I want to go on a holiday, or I want to buy a new sofa. I want to do these things. But I first need to ask everybody else. I need to validate that what I'm going to do is okay before I can do that. So ultimately, what you're saying is, I can't trust myself. Ultimately, what you're saying is, I don't trust my own opinion. I don't trust my own guidance. I don't trust my intuition. And that is a problematic point to be in, because sometimes asking people for permission can go horribly, horribly wrong. And in fact, it often also does. And when I say horribly, horribly wrong, I don't mean like catastrophes and whatever. I mean like for your own happiness, for your own sanity, for that intuitive guidance that you've just been given of this is the right thing. Because there's a number of different things. Number one, the person that you're asking might not be able to see the vision of it. They might not get it. They might not see, well, what's wrong with the sofa you have now? Why do you need another sofa? There's nothing wrong with the sofa you have now. But they don't see the vision. They don't see that it would just complete the look. It would just make your home feel more welcoming to you, that it would just bring you more peace. It would make you happy on a level that you just kind of have to be in your own body to feel it. All of those of you who have your own places and love to decorate, you'll know exactly what I mean when I'm like, sometimes a new sofa will just do the thing, or like a new vase or whatever. I don't know, something. And it just brings a joy that, makes you feel better at home. It makes you feel more comfortable at home. It makes you feel more at rest, more at ease. It just brings a sense of happiness. But other people can't see that necessarily. All they see is just like, but you already have a sofa. That's just ridiculous. No, save your money for something else. No, be logical, be wise, be responsible with your money. Why are you going to go buy a sofa for them? Blah, 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 blah. Right? Or it could be, like if let's take it to something slightly bigger or something more dramatic, like traveling abroad, living somewhere else. They might not see that you're feeling suffocated, you feel drained, you feel tired of the humdrum of your life where you are now. And taking this step of moving to another country will bring about something in you. What? Sorry, that's Twinkle having a little whining. I'm not sure what for, but if you can hear it, that's her. It's also a question of moving could bring you the rizq that Allah wants for you if it's not where you are right now. Sometimes moving to a different place is where we're going to meet, a partner, where we're going to find that job that is going to be fulfilling for us, where we're going to find the experience that are going to help us grow and evolve as people and ultimately move closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't know where all of these things are going to happen. And so when we're feeling that pull, that guidance to go somewhere, this is not something that can always logically be explained in words, in terms. It's a feeling and a vision that other people just won't be able to see unless they are you. And so when you're asking for permission or for that validation from somebody outside of yourself, you can risk asking someone who just don't get it, who just doesn't get it, and who might, as a result, talk you out of it, talk you out of doing that thing that your soul is being guided towards. And yes, sometimes your soul is being guided to purchasing a new sofa. That is also sometimes soul led. Let's not put it to if you can only be soul led if it's something grand and big. Sometimes it's the little things that are soul led, because the little things accumulated become big things. Okay, so let me just say that right off the back right now. But they don't always see the vision, and so they might guide you out of that. And again, this could be problematic because it can rob you of little joys that make life worth living for you, that ultimately accumulated over time might bring you a bigger reward, might bring you greater happiness, whatever it might be, a greater sense of fulfillment, even again, if it's something very, very small. Another reason is because other people might be playing it too safe. Especially if you're asking family, mum and dad want to protect you. Okay. So they, if they could, they would wrap you in bubble wrap and, keep you at home in a room and just be like, I'm going to feed you myself and bathe you myself and take care of you because the world is dangerous. Right. So parents specifically are going to play it too safe, and, they will often guide and advise based on what is safest for you, and also based on like logically what will make most sense according to what I would want for you. So for instance, my mum will always try and guide me according to where can I potentially meet a husband, right? So while she loved where I lived in Spain up in the mountains, she was also like, okay, but like you're gonna have to get married again at some point, so like, where are you gonna meet a husband if you live up in the mountains with your chickens and your turkey? So of course, she was like, okay, at some point you're going to have to move back to Denmark, or you have to move to England again, or something where there's more chances of you meeting an actual partner, So that's her thinking, because she sees it as that whole like, okay, this is my objective for you, and so I will guide you according to that objective. And in that, there's a sense of I don't know if you guys can hear all the background sounds. I've moved to like very centrally in Modica in Sicily, and the place that I've moved to is not very sound isolated, so it's interesting. I might have to see in future if there's something I can do about it, but for now, I'm just slowly getting irritated by it. I'm just gonna be honest with you, it's kind of irritating me. But anyway, okay, moving on. So yeah, they're gonna try and play it safe. They're gonna try and keep you protected. They're gonna try and do these things, and your thing might initially not sound like like the safest thing to do or the most reasonable, logical thing to do. And so if you're asking someone who's trying to keep you safe or like tries to keep you out of trouble, they might advise against it simply because their objective is to like, I'm going to advise you according to me not getting in trouble with you later down the road because I said yes, do it, and then it went wrong. Right. Or then you got hurt or whatever. We are going to talk about this also. So keep that, put a little thingamabob on it, and we'll get back to it. Guys, put it in your pocket. There we go. Put it in your pocket. We'll come back to that. Okay. Okay. Another one, another reason why sometimes it's not the best to ask for that permission or for approval of your ideas is because all of us wow, all of us to quite a degree will base our answers and advice off of our own experience. And sometimes that'll work in your favor and sometimes it won't. But oftentimes, if you're asking for something, people will base it off of their own experience, and most people's own experiences, I'm really sorry to say this if it's offensive to some people, are still very limited because they're also playing it too safe. So a lot of people, as I said, even something like a new sofa, it's not because nobody's ever bought a new sofa in their life, but most people will be like, yeah, you know what? People advise that you have to like save your money for a rainy day and whatever, and, do with your money. Like people will be like, oh, that sounds like, you should probably save the money, because what if next month there's a dental bill or whatever? And then, that money you should have spent on that bill instead of a new sofa or whatever. Like, so people will always also most of the time advise based on their own experiences and what they've learned. And their lesson is usually the same as yours, and like try and play it safe, try and be logical. But the problem is that not everything is logical, and that doesn't make it wrong. An illogical decision doesn't make it wrong. Just because something doesn't always make sense doesn't make it a bad decision. And so sometimes, especially with those intuitively led decisions and choices that we want to make in our life, they are usually quite often not logical. Or like they don't feel logical. We can't always explain it. It's a feeling, it's a sensation, it's a way of being. It's something that we can't put words on. And for that reason, it can come off illogical. A lot of the decisions I've made in my life feel illogical, and somehow they've made the most sense in action. You know, coming to Sicily and then being like offered a job at a veterinary clinic, even though I don't speak Italian, still don't, by the way. I'm being so slow with learning my Italian, and I don't have any experience or degree or education within the veterinary field. It seems illogical. It seems like, what? That doesn't even make sense. What are you doing? And somehow, I'm however many months into it now, and I am overjoyous. I am so happy with it, and it makes perfect sense for me, you know. But again, black on white, if I was to sort of like sit down and explain it to someone, it does not make sense. It is not logical, but it doesn't make the decision wrong. And again, so these are the things where we can say like, but it just feels right. It feels like the right decision. And quite often, most people, if you're asking other people's opinions, they don't have these gut feelings with you. They don't have this intuitive drive and pull. So they're going to base their advice off of everything but that. Everything but this soul connection that you have to the decision that you want to make, even if it's a small one. Yes, don't forget that. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. If you find yourself quite often, like, as I said, I've been here myself and I had to also do these things. So I understand that it can be quite difficult to begin with, because the first thing you have to do is realize and start thinking about the amount of things where you are asking for permission. And at first it's like, I'm doing my thing, like just because I'm asking advice. And sometimes even asking advice is, like asking for permission, but in disguise. So really be honest with yourself and recognize, like, how many decisions have I made solely based off the fact that I wanted it, and I wasn't really that bothered what everybody else was going to say. I was just going to follow through with where I was being guided and led. And think of like any decisions that you've made in the last 6 months to a year, where you've had this sensation that you wanted to ask permission from someone. And sometimes it's something as like, oh, I just wanted to change my phone. I wanted to upgrade my phone. It could be that I wanted to sign up for HBO or something like a whatever streaming service. It could be I wanted to cut my hair. That's also a really big one. Quite a lot of us actually. Oh, I'm sorry if you're listening, darling. Another member of the group. Not that long ago, a few weeks ago, maybe like a couple of months now, actually, messaged me and was like, how do you think I should cut my hair? I was like, girl, whatever the idea you had the first time around was probably the right one. I'm not going to tell you how to cut your hair. And she did it, and she looked absolutely beautiful, mashallah. So even something like that. Yes, even these things. What color should I paint my nails? Like sometimes it's just like indecisiveness. If it's like, oh, I'm stuck between pink and red. I usually say to people, the first one that you went with, the first one that you thought of. If you went to the nail salon saying I wanted red nails and then you got distracted by a pink one, you should just go for the red one because you already thought about that before you went in. Like, just go for that. Sometimes it's fun to change it up and whatever, but go for the one that you like. There's a part of you that want it even before the decision had to be made, or whatever you're being pulled towards in that moment, right? So if it's like, oh, I said I want it red, but wow, that pink is really pulling me right now, go for the pink. Like, just go for whatever it is that you're like, feel like that'll make me the most happiest, right? It's not deeper than that necessarily, right? Like, but think back on every decision that you've made and think about the amount of times you've asked everyone but yourself, what would make most sense for me? What would make me happy? Why did I feel the need to ask my friend what she thought my decoration should look like? I don't know. Like anything. If she thought it was okay if I bought that new purse, even though it's probably going to be the most expensive purse I've owned, and I already have other purses, but like I really want this purse or whatever. Like, just think about all the ones and start admitting to yourself what you're doing. There can be times where sometimes like, oh, I just want to ask for a little bit of like, I'm still unsure on something. and genuinely unsure of something, not because I want validation for a specific answer, but genuinely like, oh, I don't know if I should do this or that, because both of them are kind of pulling towards me, and I'd like to see what people, what they think. That's fine, valid. But if it's something like I'm saying this because I want to do it, but I'm needing somebody to validate my choice. Do we see the difference? I hope we see the difference. Okay, moving on. So what I want you to do is start small. You don't always want to start with the big things. When you're going to have to learn to trust your own decision, it can be difficult at first because you have to learn how to trust your decision. And if you've never been in a situation where you've had to do that, or you've never allowed yourself to trust your decision before, it can feel quite daunting to like have to make a decision and not like ask anybody's advice first. So start small. Start with something simple, like taking yourself out. Like if it's something like spending money on yourself, going out and spending on something that feels a little bit, like where you usually would have asked somebody advice, or like been like, oh, should I like speak to my husband about this purchase first, or should I save this money for my kids or whatever? Like, no, sorry, if you're a mum, not always. Sometimes that money is for you too. But start small, take yourself out and get something that feels like, okay, I did that. I can do this. Make a decision on if you felt like you wanted to change doctors, or that you wanted to change dental surgery. Change without asking anybody's advice. Like, oh, well, this one is closer to me. Maybe I should just do what you wanted to do. Change it if it felt like the right move. Start small. Just start small and then start building it up, and start building that muscle up that says, I can trust myself. I can trust myself. And if you're feeling risque, then go for some of the big ones as well. Like, you don't have to start small. It's just sometimes it can feel more comfortable doing that and then building your way up. Okay. So you can start getting comfortable with it. Whereas if you just immediately decide like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to move country, that might feel too daunting. And if you're not fully ready for that kind of step just yet, and that kind of trust in yourself yet, you might end up going back on yourself, and then that will teach you again that you can't trust your own decision. So I would ask you to start small first and then build your way up. But I mean, of course, you know yourself best, so you know where you land in this. Okay. And then I want you to start sort of affirming within yourself that it's okay for you to take chances because Allah's protecting you. So this is not about like, I'm only trusting in myself. You're trusting that Allah will guide you. You're trusting that Allah will show you the right way. You're trusting that Allah will protect you and that Allah will catch you if you fall. One of my biggest affirmations to myself has always been, if I fall, Allah will catch me. Because I trust and believe that Allah will always catch me. Allah wants to protect his servants in this dunya and in the akhirah, okay? As long as we're, of course, being good servants and we're pleasing him, right? So I take chances in this life. I trust myself and the guidance that I feel is from Allah to take these steps and these chances in the faith that Allah will always protect me. And you know what that does? It removes the anxiety from it. It makes me feel like, oh, okay, I don't have to trust myself in this. I trust Allah. So it's not even just about I have to trust myself in my own decisions. I'm ultimately saying by trusting myself, I'm trusting the intuition and the desires that Allah is giving me. That is what I'm saying. And when I say I need to ask everybody else, I'm ultimately saying, this is, by the way, again, in what's going on inside myself, and I'm sharing it, so hopefully it can help you as well. When I say to myself, I need to ask somebody's advice, I start feeling like I'm ultimately saying I don't trust Allah's guidance right now. Does that make sense when I'm saying it this way? So when I feel guided towards something, and it's truly a guide, it's not just like a quick little in and out desire, but like a true guidance, and it's staying there, and it's like, oh, I'm really feeling pulled and drawn to this thing. I say to myself, acting on it means that I trust Allah's guidance. Not acting on it and feeling like I have to ask everybody else is ultimately me saying I don't trust Allah's guidance in me, like what he's guiding me towards. And that in and of itself makes me build that trust with Allah even more, while I'm building the trust within myself to read and understand myself. Now, as I'm saying this, I want you also to be very aware that this is something that takes time to build. I've been doing it for years now, many, many years, like 20 at least, around about 20 years. So, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And in the beginning, it was far more difficult. And now it's a muscle. It's very strong. I've been doing it for so long that I just trust and believe. And so I take the chances in faith. Right? I take the chances knowing that Allah is my safety net. It's not plastic. It's not a net with big holes, a small hole. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that makes me feel so comfortable taking that chance, taking that leap of faith, because Allah's got me. Allah will always have me. Okay. So when in doubt, go to that kind of conversation with yourself whenever you need to make a decision for yourself and not ask permission from everybody else. And ultimately, if you want to, you can always ask Allah for permission, right? Pray about it. Ask in the dua. And lastly, remember that thing we put in the pocket? Or what if I advise somebody on something and then it's the wrong thing, right? So you make a decision and it's the wrong thing. Okay. There's a couple of things here that I want you to really listen to me when I say this. Number one, there is no thing as a wrong thing. Obviously there's haram and halal, but we're not talking about this. We're talking about making a decision here, okay? There is no such thing as a wrong thing because it would never be unless Allah allowed it to be. Okay, so if you make a decision, it's because Allah allowed you to make that decision. And if you walk into something and it turns out, oh, that didn't turn out as successfully as I'd hoped, it's because Allah wanted you to experience that because there was a lesson and growth in there for you. Okay, so it still wasn't a wrong decision, but you have to learn and take in what Allah wants you to take in at that moment. And then at that moment, we have to remember nothing is set in stone. We can always change, redirect, try again. And so those are the two things. There's no such thing as a wrong decision. There's only lessons and growth. And then the comeback after that, where you do it even better or you do something different. And there's the redirections where we say, oh, I might have miscalculated slightly here. I'm going to try something differently. I'm going to change up the thing. I'm going to take a couple of steps back and take a step in a different direction. And all of these things are perfectly okay. They're perfectly valid. They don't diminish your choices or your ability to make choices for yourself, because remember, everything that happens for you is only by the will of Allah. So everything that happens for you, every decision that you make, even though you're the one who makes the decision, Allah still has to say, I allow it. I allow it. I allow it. And when he allows, even for something where he's like, that is not for you, but I allow it, because when you take this step, when you make this decision, when you go down that road, there will be a lesson for you there. So you will see for yourself and experience on your own why it can't happen this way, or why it shouldn't be in that place, or why whatever it is shouldn't be the way that it is. And you have the job in that situation to take that on board and say, thank you for that, Ya Rab, thank you for this lesson, even though I wasn't necessarily prepared for it, because we're not always prepared for the lessons, right? Even though I wasn't necessarily prepared for it, taking it on board and then saying, okay, now what? Because it's never a full stop. Remember that. This is why I say you can always, always change or redirect. You're never stuck. You're never stuck just because you made a choice one time. You bought the sofa and then you realize, you know what? It wasn't as impressive as I thought. Sell it on Facebook Marketplace and get another one. It's never that deep. So you move to another country and you realize, you know what? I miss my family and I didn't think I would because they're kind of annoying, but I do. And I kind of feel like I want to go back home. Cool. Put your apartment or Airbnb or whatever you've got there, quit your job, whatever, and move back. It's never that deep. You quit your job and got another job. You didn't like it. You were like, I kind of preferred the field I was in before. Okay. Quit your job and apply for jobs again in another field. It's never that deep. And I know that some of you are like, well, it's not just that easy. No, it's not always like from one day to another. But that's okay too. We don't need immediate gratification all the time. It's okay if a move back takes 2 months, that's okay. You'll still be moving back. It's okay if finding a job again in that field is going to take some time. That's okay. The jobs are still going to be there. So you'll just keep applying until you get that job. It's never that deep. And it's okay if it takes time, because sometimes what do we have to have? Sabr. Sabr, patience in these things, right? So if we make a decision and we're like, oh, that doesn't feel as good or as right as I thought it would, let me redirect. The redirection sometimes can take time, and that is okay. All we have to remember is being patient, because while we are making these decisions, Allah is orchestrating in the back scenes. He's behind the scenes. He's orchestrating and lining the things up so that when we make the right decisions when we make the decision and we're going down the path that Allah genuinely wants us down, even the ones like where we have the lessons and we're like, oh, that wasn't the right one. He's like, good, you learned the lesson. Now let's redirect you back to that place. He's lining things up, and you're not seeing all of these things. And sometimes that'll take time for all of that to come together. And in that time, you need to have that patience. So if it's not lining up immediately for that immediate redirection back into something or in another direction, sabr habibti, sabr, and alhamdulillah, because if it happened at the moment you wanted it to, things might not align in a way that would be beneficial to you. So sabr. But remember, even if you feel like you've made a quote unquote wrong decision, even though again we could argue, is there really such a thing as a wrong decision? I would say no. There's only lessons and growth. But let's say you want to call it a wrong decision. You make a wrong decision and you're like, oh, I don't like this. Choose again. Change it up. Redirect. Modify where needs to be modified. Do what needs to be done. There's that saying that went around social media, oh gosh, like in the early, I don't know, 2010, 11, 12, I can't even remember how long ago. You're not a tree, move. If you saw that, if you remember that, think of yourself that way as well. And then move in faith. Move in faith. Always have that tawakkul. Move in this faith that Allah will guide and support and protect. This is how you learn to trust your decisions and stop asking for permission. The only permission you need is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's. Everybody else need permission from Allah as well. Right? And if they need to start advising you and they start advising wrong, that's still on you. Guess what? That's still on you, because on Judgment Day, when you're standing there face to face with Allah and He says, why didn't you do that? I was calling you in this direction and you didn't listen. You said, well, Susan from down the street said, and He's like, well, Susan's not the one who's living your life, is she now? I gave you the desire, the intuition, the pull, the feeling. Why did you ignore my calling? Right? So we can't even blame it on Susan on Yawm al-Qiyamah. We can't say, but Susan said, because He's like, well, I'm going to speak to Susan in her own time about her life, but this is your life. Why are you letting Susan dictate your life for you? Right? So stop asking for permission. It's okay sometimes, while we're still getting stronger and being better about it. But I want you to start looking at your life as in, am I asking permission to be happy? Am I asking permission to live my life in ways that would truly make me happy and bring me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How many times have I negotiated on my happiness because I asked for permission and the permission wasn't granted? How many times have I adjusted the things I wanted because somebody didn't feel good about the thing that I wanted to do, the way that I felt good about the thing that I wanted to do. And as a result, I minimized my dream, my desire, my calling, so that they would be comfortable with it, so that other people from the outside would look in and say, oh, I'm very impressed with her. But ultimately, I'm not feeling good about it. Okay, so there's a little something for you to think about today. I hope there was something beneficial for you in this episode. As usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave me a comment. If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment directly on this episode. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to contact me over on Instagram at Manifesting Muslimah, preferably Instagram, because I can do voice memos over there and I just absolutely hate texting. So feel free to reach out to me there if you've got suggestions for any future podcast episodes. Also, Drop your suggestions in for me. I love hearing from you in general. And I will see you, inshallah, on Thursday's episode. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.